Upon closing the distance, Luka recognized what Nuncreed was after. Gran stood confidently at the edge, one arm outstretched over the abyss. Nearby, a wheelbarrow had been emptied out. Mr. Nuncreed turned back toward the kids, desperation in his eyes. Rolo and Beck held steadfast in awe. Luka approached closer. Mr. Nuncreed spun back toward Gran, his voice growing louder. Mr. Nuncreed winced with anguish. His voice hardened. They both now yelled, not to each other, but at fate itself, making their peace with long-held burdens. The wind howled with encouragement. They menaced at each other, both catching their breath. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Amid a blur of emotions and memories, Luka's mind flooded with questions. The wind calmed, as if to give him the stage. And in the stillness, he began to weep. It was all just too much. Falling to his knees, Luka whimpered softly. The tears crystallized as they hit the snow. Gran stared at Luka for a moment with warm sympathy, remembering why this was all necessary. She stiffened up and brandished the torch at Mr. Nuncreed. Ignoring his final plea, Gran flung the torch into the deep dark. She smiled and exhaled in relief. Mr. Nuncreed moaned in resignation. The torch echoed as it ricocheted down the hole, punctuated with a thunderous thud. Before Gran could finish, the ground shook her to silence. Gran only had time to spin around and run to Luka. Her attempt to shield him, an honorable but trifling act. Unflinching love, pitted against an unthinking horror, there was no contest. Her warm embrace froze in an instant. That is where they remain, fixed in place, forever. And so, our story ends on this melancholy scene. In a town brought low by its secrets, sits the frozen statues of a misguided band of meddlers. The end. Well, that was dire. On the bright side, we finally figured out where all the ice is coming from. Now, we just need to find a way to deal with a mystic, unfathomable force of nature. and in the stillness, he began to hum. After the death of his father, Luka had trouble sleeping. Each night, his mother would sit at the foot of his bed and hum a gentle melody. It was the only thing that could calm his mind. The only thing that, however briefly, could make it all seem okay. That melody pervaded every memory Luka had of his mother. Shivering in the raw snow, he began to hum it out loud. Gran lowered the torch, listening closely. As recognition slowly set in, her heart sank. Those countless nights of consolation, the incomparable loss they shared together. She let the torch fall to the snow and sizzle out. A few steps toward Luka was all she could bear before dropping to the snow herself. Through a flood of tears, she began to hum along, note for note. Luka lifted his head in astonishment. The last time he heard that melody was the last night he saw his mother. Luka blinked through blurry, watery eyes, trying to see more clearly. He could just make out the impression of a familiar face. He peered across the snowscape at the woman on her knees. Something about her was undeniably his mother, only smaller, older, changed. Luka sprinted as fast as he could toward his mother. They held each other close, and the cold retreated from their bodies. Eleanor looked down at Luka, tightening her embrace in an appeal for forgiveness. Joseph slumped into the cold, wet snow. For the first time in a long time, her voice felt like her own again. Luka gazed down at Nuncreed with pity. He looked small. Joseph stared into the snow as if searching it for answers. Chapter 9. The Devil You Know. 7 months ago, Eleanor Van Horn crept down the maze of sterile hallways under perennial harvest. She stopped in front of the large steel door marked Deep Engineering. No turning back now. She raised a trembling hand. The stolen keycard worked as promised, and the door bust open with mechanical efficiency. She was immediately hit with the smell of disinfectant. It was some sort of laboratory. In one corner was a desk covered in papers. Across the room stood a tall metal pod with hoses protruding from its base. She rushed to the desk and began shifting through the piles of papers. They were experiment reports on something called Tempus liquamen. There were dozens of them. Every one stamped failed. Eleanor heard the sharp echo of footsteps approaching. She was out of time. Her eyes scanned the room, eventually landing on the strange pod. Muttering a curse under her breath, she dashed over and dove inside. Mr. Kerr addressed the crowd with a sarcastic tone. Whispers filtered through the crowd. Torment dragged on Joseph Nuncreed's face. He paused for a moment, plucking a piece of fuzz from his sweater and discarding it to the ground. Kerr gave a bow of deference. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Solomon pulled a glass vial from his pocket. In one smooth motion, he downed its contents. A triumphant smile grew across Solomon's lips. His body and face began to contort and expand as he disappeared into a belching green mist. A hushed horror gripped the crowd. This is a story about change. Sharper examined his new hands. Sharper choked out a crude squawk of a laugh. Frustrated grumbles sprinkled through the crowd. Kerr gave a subtle nod to the clipboards. A helpless quiet settled over the crowd. Sharper addressed the crowd with indignant pride. He'd planned this moment for so long that now, at the deed's fruition, it almost felt frivolous. Mr. Kerr flourished a preposterously elaborate bow. Sharper coughed up one final laugh and cracked his knuckles. And so, Sharper set about remaking the town in his own image. The fertilizer factory soon reopened for business. Sales rose steadily as more and more farmers across the countryside began to swear by its miraculous properties. Beacon Pines became famous, a secretive town that, for the right price, shared its gifts with all. Gifts that became more and more necessary in a world where winters grew longer and longer. The end. This is wrong, but things are becoming clearer now. You can feel it, right? We can't let Sharper win. He might just be the key to this whole thing. Let's see. A malice lurking behind those eyes, like a trap ready to spring. Luka felt the weight of Nuncreed's hand on his shoulder. Something wasn't right. He didn't know why, but something was telling Luka to get out of there. Luka twisted free of Nuncreed's grasp. The two scurried off, eagerly formulating a plan. He aired a long holler into the woods. Luka felt his eyes getting heavy and plopped into the beanbag. he conceded to its lumpy embrace. Once again, Luka found himself in a vast, black... This time, he knew exactly where to go. He took a single confident step forward. The world flickered and pulsed. He found himself standing in front of the frigid air of a blazing campfire, the source. He plopped down cross-legged and gazed into the cold flame. Soon enough, the fire began to die out, popping sporadically, until all that was left was a single ember. Luka stood up and dusted himself off. He plucked the glowing ember from the cold ash, examined it, and slid it into his pocket, a keepsake. The voice of his father spoke behind him. "You made me proud, buckaroo." Luka turned to face him. "Dad, what is this place?" A warm grin grew across his father's face. "A place where everything that has been and everything that could be all..." Luka found himself staring at his father's face, trying as hard as he could to memorize every single detail. "Wait? For what?" Another voice spoke out as Luka's doppelganger stepped forward. "That's up to you." Without knowing why, Luka began to weep. Is any of this real? Are you real?" Luka's father bent down to smudge away a tear. "Of course. I'm as real as the part of you that misses me." Luka turned to look at the older version of himself. "And you?" The doppelganger choked back tears. "I'm as real as the part of you that's angry he's gone. Does that make sense?" Through his tears, Luka laughed. "I think so." His father pulled him in for an embrace. "Time to go, buckaroo." Luka was startled from his dream by a banging on the floor. A commanding voice rumbled from below. Just as Luka sprang to lock the entry hatch, the door knocked open. Chapter 5. Dangers big and small. Luka stumbled back. He heard the rope ladder creak under significant weight. Keeping his eyes fixed on the hatch, he inched backward to the balcony. As his hand grasped the door handle, Luka froze. A large figure clumsily wriggled up through the hole. The large figure cocked its head inquisitively. Luka's jaw dropped. He peered more closely at the man standing in front of him. Something about him was only bigger, older, changed. Rolo proudly presented his hands to Luka. Luka moved to the side and pointed Rolo to his reflection in the balcony window. His hands shot up to his face. Rolo shadowboxed a few jabs. With a yelp, Rolo dove behind Luka.